Here he goes again. Donald Vexatious Litigant Trump is now filing an FEC complaint, an FEC lawsuit against the Biden-Harris campaign, now the Kamala Harris campaign, as she is the presumptive Democratic nominee. And Donald Trump, in his lawsuit, in his legal action, is arguing that the transfer of money from the Biden-Harris campaign to Kamala Harris, now that she's at the top of the ticket, was unlawful and improper. New York Times got the scoop. Before going into that, I just want to reflect that as Donald Trump takes these actions, doesn't it give you the exact vibes of these 70 frivolous lawsuits that he filed to try to overthrow a free and fair election back in 2020? Isn't it just a reminder of the themes that now exist in this election, that you have a phony, a fraud, a convicted felon, someone found liable for sexual assault, a loser in Donald Trump, and on the other hand, you have a successful prosecutor in Vice President Kamala Harris with a forward-looking vision for this country. More lawsuits, more whining from Donald Trump. Here is the New York Times article, Trump campaign files complaint over transfer of Biden funds to Harris. Maggie Haberman wrote this article. She says that Trump campaign filed a complaint on Tuesday with the Federal Election Commission against President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, accusing them of violating campaign finance laws by rolling Mr. Biden's, it's President Biden's, campaign funds over to Ms. Harris. That's Vice President Kamala Harris. Let's be clear about our language there. Oh, by the way, the same group of people, Citizens United, who basically destroyed campaign finance laws in this country, who recently argued before Judge Eileen Cannon, Donald Trump's appointed judge, who completely dismissed the special counsel's case. They want to have a lecture. The Republicans want to have a lecture on campaign finance laws. Really? Really? It goes on to say the complaint filed by the Trump campaign's general counsel, David Warrington, came after Mr. Biden's team amended the name of its committee on Sunday to Harris for President. Once Mr. Biden, it's President Biden, just say it right in the article. Once President Biden announced he was no longer running for a second term. The fight over what is left in, I mean, what are you doing, New York Times, here? Like, this is very intentional. Why do you keep calling the President of the United States Mr. Biden? Anyway, the fight is over what is left in President Biden's coffers that he is turning over to Vice President Harris, who had been his running mate. Kamala Harris is seeking to perpetrate a $91.5 million heist of Joe Biden's leftover campaign cash, a brazen money grab that would constitute the single largest excessive contribution and biggest violation in the history of Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 as amended, Mr. Warrington wrote in the complaint. Mr. Warrington accused the president, Ms. Harris, and the campaign treasurer of flagrantly violating the act by making and receiving an excessive contribution of nearly $100 million, and for filing fraudulent forms with the commission purporting to repurpose one candidate's principal campaign committee for the use of another campaign committee. We just pause there for a second. I mean, Donald Trump, who perpetrated decades-long frauds, where he was found liable for fraud to the tune of $500 million. Donald Trump, who's bankrupted essentially every company he's touched. Donald Trump, who's been found liable for sexual assault. Donald Trump, who's not only himself a convicted felon, the Trump Organization is a convicted felon for the fraud that it perpetrated. Donald Trump, who's been found liable for sexual assault, has the audacity to file a lawsuit because they are scared. They are running terrified right now at Vice President Kamala Harris's momentum. The article goes on to say, not all campaign finance legal experts share Mr. Warrington's view, and it's unclear what the FEC will decide. But the Trump team is looking to grind the gears in the transition from Mr. Biden to Ms. Harris in any way they can. Grind the gears? I mean, you mean they're trying to cheat. You mean they're trying to do exactly what they did in 2020. All of the things they accused the other, they are doing. And I want all Americans to know what it is that these losers in MAGA are doing, as J.D. Vance is doing his stand-up routine. That's the least funny thing ever, talking about how he's drinking Diet Mountain Dew and if that makes him gay, and like nobody in the crowd was laughing. By the way, you know the nickname that's sticking with J.D. Vance, that's sticking with him? It is Shady Vance, by the way. And that nickname is sticking with him anyway. It goes on to say, not all campaign finance legal experts share Mr. Warrington's view. It's unclear what the FEC will decide. They're trying to grind the transition to a halt. So basically, more of 2020. So just showcase the contrast between Trump's loser vision of whining and trying to be a victim and Vice President Kamala Harris's forward-looking vision for the country. The article goes on to say, Mr. Trump's advisors had made clear they would seek to legally block Mr. Biden from transferring funds to Ms. Harris, suggesting a lawsuit was likely. Instead, they're filing this complaint with the FEC, which may not be resolved before Election Day. A Biden spokesman did not immediately respond to a request for comment. An FEC spokeswoman said the agency cannot comment on pending enforcement matters. The Trump campaign complaint with the FEC argues, among other things, that Ms. Harris isn't yet the official nominee. That will not happen at the Democratic National Convention, and that Mr. Biden, by saying he won't be a candidate in the general election, isn't in a position to keep the general election contributions he has received. To date, Biden for president has provided no indication that it will return or redesignate all of its general election contributions, Mr. Warrington wrote. Thus, each and every general election contribution received by Biden for president is an excessive contribution, and Mr. Warrington accused the campaign treasurer and Ms. Harris of attempted fraud of the FEC by using their forms to, quote, rename and repurpose the committee seeking a Justice Department referral. He argued in the letter that the commission should address the matter quickly and that Ms. Harris is in the process of committing the largest campaign finance violation in American history, and she is using the commission's own forms to do it. So more whining. By the way, you had MAGA Mike Johnson basically threaten this type of legal action. Remember when MAGA Mike said this? Here, play the clip.
And in some of the states, there are impediments to just switching someone out like that. 14 million people went through the process and chose this nominee, Joe Biden. Now a handful of people have gotten together and decided he's no longer suitable. That's not how this system works. They are violating democratic principles. And I think that's a real problem, and I think there'll be a lot said about that in the days ahead.
But I want to show you what it is they are terrified. They're terrified of Vice President Kamala Harris prosecuting the case against Donald Trump, and this ridiculous legal action is just more of the same from Donald Trump. It's his backwards-looking dystopian WWE cosplay fascism versus Vice President Kamala Harris's forward-looking vision of hope and actually delivering things for the American people. One thing that I've said before, and let me say it again, just ask yourself, where was your toilet paper when Donald Trump was in office? Now, where is your 401k now, thanks to the work of Biden-Harris? For me, sometimes it's that simple, and sometimes it's as simple as the prosecutor versus the convicted felon. Here's Vice President Kamala Harris from earlier in the day. Play the clip.
So in the days and weeks ahead, I, together with you, will do everything in my power to unite our Democratic Party, to unite our nation, and to win this election. You know, as many of you know, before I was elected as vice president, before I was elected as United States Senator, I was the elected Attorney General, as I've mentioned, of California. And before that, I was a courtroom prosecutor. In those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
Well, there you have it, folks. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 3 million subscribers. Share the word with friends, family, coworkers, colleagues, anybody you know about this network. You can help support the network at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Thanks as always. It's not possible without you.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.